Hello and good evening, everybody. Welcome to the 8th episode of the NOVA Insights. I suppose those who live in the Alps might be a bit tired from all the good flying days, but I think that shouldn't be a big problem. My name is Till Gottbrat. I am the captain of the NOVA pilot team and do some of the marketing work at NOVA. And I love paragliding. Tonight we're going to have Philipp Medicus. He's the head of R&D at NOVA, and he will talk about 2.5-liners and also new ways in development of paragliders. But before we start, I would like to point out a few organizational details. Number one is you are encouraged to ask questions in the chat, but you have to be logged in on YouTube to be able to post there. So those who don't have an account yet, better do it now. The second thing is I would like to ask you not to ask off-topic questions. In the last episode, we had too many of them, and that was kind of blocking the chat. And finally, this live stream will be recorded. So those who have to do something else, they can also watch it later, but they can't ask questions. Okay, and now let's switch to people. People, welcome, and maybe you can quickly introduce yourself before we start.
I didn't hear the last couple of words from you, Till. I hope the others did. So, hello from my side. What was missing in your introduction? I'm into flying since a kid, basically, and I'm paragliding since quite exactly 20 years already. And I've been starting to work at NOVA gradually, actually, besides my studies as a mechanical engineer. So there is not a hard date where I started to work for NOVA, but it's around 10 years that I'm a full-time employee at NOVA. And most of that 10 years already, I am responsible for designing the wings. So for the technical aspect of the wing design. And I think I switch to sharing my screen, if that's okay with you, Till.
Yeah, go ahead.
So oops. I'm struggling to find not struggling anymore. Sorry.
Still, we don't only see your face, which is not too bad.
But
now it looks better.
But it's improvable. Yeah. Sorry. And
can you go on full screen presentation?
Yes.
So, sorry to everybody if there's some inconvenience. Okay, here we go.
Finally.
Your turn, people.
Finally. So I would like to talk with you about 3 topics mainly. That's simulation methods in paragliding design, an area where we made a lot of progress during the last 1, 2, 3 years. I want to talk to you about 2.5-liners in general, and specifically about the Mentor 7, which is a 2.5-liner, or a Mentor 7 Lite, which we decided to launch as the first wing. So I'm going to start with simulations. There are two big aspects of simulation. The one aspect is the airflow simulation, or computational fluid dynamics, also called CFD short. That's basically a virtual wind tunnel. And in this virtual wind tunnel, you can put whatever object you want. The object we want to put in are obviously paragliders. And this virtual wind tunnel then gives us the aerodynamic forces which act on the paraglider. That's what we are most interested in. So that's a screenshot of such a simulation where you see the pressure forces acting on the paraglider. Blue is the area of low pressure, red is the area of high pressure. There are many different visualization methods. You can also see that's called virtual wool thread, so which gives you a very good idea of how the air is actually passing above and below the wing. You can have close-up looks here at the wingtip. I hope it's visible. I hope this vortex movement is visible, which is created by the air passing from the high pressure bottom sail to the lower pressure top sail. We use this airflow simulation to optimize the airfoil, to optimize the openings. We can also see with the CFD simulation the internal pressure, which is obviously affected by the shape of the openings. We optimize the shape, the plant form of the wing, and we also optimize the ballooning. And the CFD simulations are not so much in the day-to-day work about colorful pictures, but it's more about hard numbers, which I then, for example, use to compare different wings and create polar curves, which might look like this, which shows lift different created by different airfoils. And I then compare, before building a first prototype, I often compare polar curves of 100 different wings. The second aspect of the simulation is the structural simulation. This is necessary because the object which we put in that virtual wind tunnel I was talking about before is a rigid object. And we all know the paraglider is as non-rigid as aircraft can get. And this structural simulation basically knows that the wing is made out of cloth and which deforms in several ways. What you see here is a simulation of a Mentor 7 prototype at full speed. And on bottom, you see the very same prototype flying at full speed and the wing is pretty fast. So the pressure at the stagnation point gets pretty high and therefore creates some wrinkles. In this case, obviously, the goal is to minimize deformations and to minimize wrinkles. And this structural simulation is a very important tool to play on the computer with different concepts to minimize the wrinkles. And here you see the leading edge shape of Mentor 7. This is at trim speed, so the comparison is quite a bit of a cheat, but still this very clean shape we see here is the result of many, many simulations and many iterations. And it's not just try and error, but the simulations, or by trying and failing in the simulations, you get a deeper understanding of how the different aspects of wing design interact than you could ever get by building prototypes, because the number of prototypes you can build is obviously limited, and even worse, the cycle time for building a prototype and taking photos and then building another one is like 1 month, whereas the simulation time is 1 hour. So you can learn a lot faster, and you have a lot more data to learn with this simulation possibility than you would have without it. There are
just a quick question.
Yes.
Quick question from my side. Am I right to assume that every prototype that NOVA builds is actually a step forward? Because I assume you only build prototypes of wings that show an improvement in the simulations as well. Do you also sometimes have prototypes that don't do what they are supposed to do?
Yes. I mean, otherwise we wouldn't need more than 1 prototype. So there obviously, I mean, not obviously, but there are still setbacks. And so what the simulation enables us to build a pretty good first prototype, but it still happens that the third prototype is worse than the second, and we hope for the fourth to be better than the second. So there are still setbacks, and the degree to which the simulation predicts reality gets bigger and bigger, but there has always to be some deviation, because any simulation deviates to a certain extent from the real world, and our simulations are no exceptions to that. So there are still setbacks, and we don't simulate every aspect of flying. The most extreme example is an acro paraglider, for example, where the surprises are a lot bigger than for a cross-country wing. Yeah, so we still learn by failing in real life as well.
Okay, there's one quick question from Laszlo Dorza, and he wants to know, which app do you use for the simulations?
Which programs? It's the
which program?
It's the CFD simulations I've shown. It's an open source software called OpenFoam. It's it's quite common and quite well performing. So it's a standard. It's nothing paragliding specific. It's a standard software which is used from automotive industries to whatever people who build bridges. And the structural simulation is our own solver. So it's also nothing specific to paragliding, but not open source.
Thank you.
Yeah. So about the structural simulations, there are obviously not only unwanted deformations on a paraglider, but also wanted deformations. An obvious example is applying brakes. So that's a tandem proto where you see gradually pulling more brakes. In this simulation, we can actually measure the brake pressure. We can measure the lift which is created. So we can predict pretty well how the flare of a wing is going to be. Because a wing that flares well is supposed to increase its lift a lot when you pull the brakes. That would be my technical translation of a good flare. And furthermore, you might want to not need too much brake travel, and you might not want to have too much brake pressure. And all those aspects can be simulated very precisely in with the tools we use. And we can obviously also judge the performance on brakes, which on a XC-wing is important for the climb performance. It's not the most important aspect of climb performance, but it's one important aspect of climb performance. Here is another simulation to real life example. It's something which probably most of you know. This wrinkle which you see here is to a certain extent visible on most paragliders, 3-liners and 2-liners. And I will try to explain what causes this wrinkle. Maybe some of you know on many airplanes have this small trim tab, which is marked by this arrow, which is way smaller than the actual rudder. And what this trim tab does, here's a sketch of this trim tab. On the very rear, you see the trim tab, which is moved downwards here, and thereby it creates lift. And this lift then moves the actual rudder upwards. That's the function of a trim tab, which is visible on many airplanes. And what is happening on the Paraglider is quite the same, I would say. You pull the brake downwards, which creates lift. And this joint, which is here on the airplane, is the C attachment. So the wrinkle you see here, which is usually above the C attachment, on the B-liner above the B attachment, is the joint which is the rudder of an airplane. Yeah, we can also obviously simulate those kind of deformations, and we can judge if it's harmful or not, if it's just an aesthetical problem, or if it decreases performance, if it increases brake pressure, whatever. We can also measure how the brake pressure progresses, which is quite important for the feeling you get on a glider. You want the brake pressure to smoothly progress. And if you have too much of such deformations, you might have a sluggish feeling, which we can to some extent at least predict in the simulation. So all these are great tools, and it's a great help to improve the wing, but there are still real life setbacks. Otherwise, it might be boring. And even more complicated task is the collapse of a paraglider. Here you see 3 collapses of frontal collapses of a Mentor 7. They are not the same, but they look very similar. But you see there are subtle differences. The wingtip collapses a bit more violently on top and bottom than in the middle. And I tried very small trim changes to affect the collapse behavior. And again, you see that the GoPro screenshot is not the very best quality, but you see that the behavior of the wing is similar. So yeah, we can also simulate collapses and also full speed stability to a certain extent. So we can, for example, accelerate the wing until it collapses. So that's a surprise we are not dealing with anymore, that we build wings that would collapse at half speed. Because yeah, we improve those concepts on the computer before building them. So the second topic of my presentation is the 2.5-liner. What makes a 2.5-liner a 2.5-liner is very simple. It's the C3 line is missing. So you see here at the wingtips, there is just the A and B lines, at least just A and B main lines, and there is no C3 main line. That's the main property of the 2.5-liner. You see here that's in Mentor 7 again, actually, you see, especially in the 2-liner sections, you see the nylon rods, which we are using, which improve the stability a lot and which are necessary for nice flying behavior, the same way as they are necessary on actual 2-liners.
But these lines mean that the rods, they mean that it's not possible anymore, this easy packing concept that NOVA used to have. Is that right?
Yes, it needs, it's not meant to stuff it to violently stuff it into a sack, into a packing bag. It needs a bit, the rods need a bit more care when packing the glider. That's, if you want that to be that's something which you need to take care of, like with any wing with that amount of rods. The advantages of this concept is obviously less line drag, although the difference is not very big on a 2.5-liner. Here we have 9 main lines, including the stabilo main line. And if we had a C3, it would be 10 main lines, so around 10% drag. Actually, it's even less than 10% drag safe because we have no brake here. So the line drag, the reduced line drag is beneficial, although it's not a very big benefit because the effect is quite small. A more important effect is the improved wing twist along the whole polar curve. So when you, that's the screen, on the screen you see a wing at trim speed. The wing at top speed does something like this. And it's quite important that this transition happens close to the aerodynamically optimum way, which means there is an ideal wing twist for trim speed and an ideal wing twist for top speed. By wing twist, I mean how the angle of attack changes along the wingspan. And that's quite difficult to move all those lines with a riser being close to that optimum. And by removing just this one line, things get a lot easier and you can stay a lot closer to that ideal wing twist along the whole polar curve. So the wing's performance benefits from this more than it does from the line drag. And last but not least, the C steering improves with this 2.5-liner concept because there are less lines to pull, less operating forces needed on the C handle, which makes it, which reduces the effort which is needed to operate it.
Can you point out more in general, also applying on a 2-liner as well as on the Mentor 7 now as a 2.5-liner, what the general concept is of rear riser steering?
What rear riser steering is about? Well, it's about it's about controlling the angle of attack in an efficient way, and the rear riser steering is one of the main advantages of 2-liners, where the rear riser steering as well as the accelerating is really simple, because you have just 2 line levers and which act as 2 joints. And when you pull the rear riser, you increase the angle of attack without distorting the airfoil. If you pull just the C riser on a normal 3-liner, you distort the airfoil a lot, which does a lot of harm to the performance and might even do a lot of harm to the stability. So the advantage, and both is not what you want to have. And with this 2.5-liner and the riser we developed, it's possible to increase the angle of attack without any distortion of the airfoil, and furthermore with very little operating forces. So that's something which the simulation predicts as well. So with 100 kilo takeoff weight, we have around 6 kilogram operating forces on the C handle, which by the way, to me and to the other pilots who flew the wing, it sounds more than it feels. Because when I was surprised about the 6 kilos, because I was quite sure it would be less, because it can be really operated effortless. But probably you have to subtract the weight of your arms. And
so it means that both the airfoil as well as the riser setup has to be adapted to each other to make the whole system work perfectly.
Yes, and also and both impacts the operating forces a lot. For example, the more load you have on the A risers, and on the more load there's on the A lines, the less load obviously on B and C. And with this rear riser steering, you only pull the C's and the B's. So if you have comparably little load on B and C, the operating force is really nice and it feels quite effortless. And that does not work with every wing, obviously. So yeah, you can't attach this riser to any different wing and expect the same experience.
Yeah, there's a question from Affenrotze. He wants to know whether the B stall is possible still on the Mentor 7.
No, we recommend not to do it, because there is not just one B riser anymore. So if you look at this riser rendering, this long to this long riser, there are 3 lines attached, which is B1, B2, and the stabilo. And the smaller riser with just 1 single line attached is the B3 riser with the B3 line attached. And so you couldn't even really pull all B lines at the same with one hand. And I think if you did, or if it was possible, it would still not be a B stall, because on the B3 the wing would stall completely, and in the center it would do something different. So I think it doesn't make sense for 2 reasons at least. But to me, on 3-liners, even on normal 3-liners with the aspect ratio of the Mentor or above, the B stall doesn't make too much sense as a real life quick descent maneuver, which is needed in very turbulent conditions, because those kind of wings, even if they are 3-liners, tend to deform a lot. But there is a very nice alternative to the D stall on the Mentor 7, which is the B3 stall, which you induce by pulling just the B3 line, and it provides more stability and more sync rate than big ears, but with a similar forward speed. So it's not the actual replacement of the B stall, but it's a nice quick descent maneuver on the Mentor.
There are two more questions that are also related to this topic. One is from Slowly number 9. And he's asking, is it simpler to produce a 2.5-liner than a regular 3-liner? And does it take less or more time at the factory to create a Mentor 7 than a Mentor 6?
Yeah, those are kind of two independent questions. I think producing a 2.5-liner is not simpler than a 3-liner. I mean, you save a couple of line elements which you don't have to produce. You save a couple of diagonal ribs which you don't have to produce. But on the other hand, you have to insert those nylon rods and the nylon housing. So I would say it's quite even. The production-wise, the advantages and the disadvantages. In case of the Mentor 7, the Mentor 7 has significantly more cell count, so 66 cells compared to formerly 59. So it's a more complex wing overall, more parts. So the production time for the labor aspect of the Mentor 7, the production time is going to be higher than it was on the Mentor 6. But that's not because of the 2.5-liner setup. That's because we choose to increase the complexity for even more performance gain.
Okay. And the other question from Martin Alexander is, does this line layout tend to more to cravats than ordinary 3-liners?
No, I don't see a reason for this. I mean, the difference to the 3-liner would be is this C3, and there is no cravat scenario which I can imagine which would be prevented by the C3 line, and which is more likely if the C3 line is missing. So I don't think cravats any more or any less likely because of this setup than compared to a 3-liner setup.
But generally speaking, a higher aspect ratio is more prone to cravats.
Yes. That's. I think the aspect ratio is maybe the most important of the measurable aspects which affect the likeliness of cravats. And I mean, furthermore, the line layout impacts the likeliness as well, but not the 2.5 or 3 line levels line layout. And the aspect ratio with 5.5 is quite low. For a high B wing, it's quite low, and so therefore the cravat risk is quite low as well, I would say, and certainly not affected by the 2.5-liner setup in one way or another. So I talked about the advantages of the 2.5-liner setup. The disadvantages in case of the Mentor 7 is the riser complexity. So the C handle, for example, is very beneficial in flight, and no one who used it could imagine missing it. but it's a handle which a line could be tangled around at launch. So it needs a bit more. It needs a bit more attention at launch. The riser is a bit longer than it's supposed to be. So it's just the riser overall needs a bit more attention than a conventional riser would need, but it's nothing crazy. And another disadvantage, not so much for real life flying, but for SIV and for certification, that some maneuvers are quite difficult to induce. For example, it's very difficult to induce a frontal collapse on the Mentor 7 for two reasons. One reason is there is a lot of load on the A-line, which contributes to the high stability in flight. And the second reason is the 2.5 line setup. The wingtips need a lot more travel on the A's to collapse than the center wing. That's not valid for that's not relevant in real life by gust or turbulence induced collapses, but it's relevant for induced collapses by pulling the A's. I have a video. I will try to play it. Hopefully you see a bit. That shows the, sorry. That shows a frontal collapse. I will pause here. I hope you see the picture. So as I told you before, that's a full force frontal collapse. It's Theo de Blick pulling it. So he's certainly not afraid of pulling hard, but still he fails to create a bigger frontal collapse than this. And he also fails to collapse the wingtips at the same times. So the wingtips collapse after the front has reopened already, and then the wingtips open. Oops. I hope it was somewhat visible for you with the internet connection. So yeah, that's not a real life problem, but it's a simulation problem, which makes things a bit trickier in SIV or for the certification. So that were my general statements about 2.5-liners, and I will finish my presentation with a bit more specific Mentor 7, with a bit more specific statements about the Mentor 7. So the 2.5-liner setup of the Mentor 7 is certainly one important and big difference to the Mentor 6, but it's not the only one. The 2.5-liner setup is obviously, it's certainly the most marketable difference, and it's an important difference, but it's not the only one. We have changed the shape of the wing completely. So you see here a comparison of Mentor 6 and Mentor 7. You see the Mentor 6 has a lot more curvature and the wingtips being flatter in the center. On the Mentor 7, it's the other way around. The tips are a lot flatter. The center is slightly more curved. That contributes to, and also in the side view, you see it's two completely different wings. So that's these differences are a result of things we learned on the XENON, and also a result of things we learned due to these new simulation methods, which can predict performance and stability way better than it ever could. That's why the shape and the outline of the Mentor 7 looks somewhat untypical for high B wings, at least. The performance, the advantages of this changed curvature, the changed sweep, that means how much the tips are moved back or forth. and the advantages of the airfoil and the openings. In the end, it's about performance and stability. And those are both aspects where the Mentor 7 really shines. It's very performant, it's very fast, and it's very stable. It's very fast at top speed. It's actually quite slow at trim speed. So it's a really new wing. The difference between the Mentor 2 and the Mentor 6 is, I would say, a lot smaller than the difference between the Mentor 6 and the Mentor 7.
Is there also an advantage of having a lower trim speed?
Yes, yes. Couple of advantages. One obvious advantage is the turning radius. When thermaling is smaller, the slower you fly, the more narrow you can turn, the better you will climb, because you can fly closer to the thermal core, and it will most likely also reduce your sink rate. Having a slow trim speed will reduce your sink rate, which again contributes to the climbing performance. So what you want in the end, I would say, is a big speed range. You want to be able to fly as slow as possible for thermaling, at least in most cases, and you want to be able to fly as fast as possible for flying in between the thermals. And the Mentor 7 is rather slow at trim speed compared to other high B wings, and we didn't find a high B wing which matches the top speed of the Mentor 7. So as far as regarding our comparison flights, it's the fastest EMB wing.
When you talk about thermaling, is there a certain technique that you and the test pilots actually recommend to get the best climb?
On the Mentor 7 or on a 2.5 liner, there is no 2.5 liner specific thermaling technique. It's still a normal paraglider. And actually the Mentor 7, we have quite a couple of pilots who flew it, and they all found it very, very easy and smooth and simple to fly. So no special technique required. So the only thing which the only thing which is different in flying compared to at least the previous Mentor 6 is the rear riser flying, because you can really lock at full speed and fly through turbulences by just controlling the angle of attack with the C risers. So that's a really different experience, but the normal flying doesn't need any special technique.
So that means the more a pilot pushes the bar, the more he gets out of the Mentor 7.
I would tend to say so. Yes. Yeah. Because the top speed itself is exceptional, and the stability and the performance at top speed as well.
Hakan Güler is asking whether this concept is also possibly applicable on a tandem or on a low B glider as well.
I mean, technically there is low B and high B. It's the very same certification criteria for both. So it's up to the manufacturer to say this is a low B and this is a high B. There is no hard criteria, or there is no different tests to pass. So in theory, absolutely, it would be possible to have a low B wing with this technology, since there are no hard limits. But I'm not but the benefits for a low B wing are much smaller, because I don't see the typical low B pilot using the speed system so much. And so I think the benefit, I mean, the benefit for a school glider, for example, is certainly non-existent. It wouldn't make any sense. And from my today's point of view, I'm a bit hesitant about a low B wing, because it's if pilots only rarely use the speed system, if they just use it to escape the valley wind one time a year, it doesn't really make sense. So I think it's super beneficial for a high performance cross-country wing, but I'm not so sure about the recreational low B pilot who doesn't use the speed system so much. Yeah. And about the tandem wing, on the tandem wing, I would say it's even less beneficial, because nobody except on an XC tandem wing, which is a super small niche, but on a classical commercial tandem wing, I don't see any benefit. Actually, most modern tandem gliders are still 4-liners, because 4-liners enable thinner airfoils, which reduce the brake pressure. So the state-of-the-art technology on tandem gliders are 4-liners. So I don't see 2.5-liner tandems anytime soon, except some super special cross-country tandem.
And it would require to have a speed bar also, which tandems typically don't have.
Yes, I mean, you could theoretically combine that with trimmers. So you could open the trimmers and then control the speed with the C handles. So that should work. But other than that, I don't think it makes any sense, since to my knowledge, most of the commercial tandems are 4-liners.
Yeah. Talking about speed, there is a question from Jerry Mann which relates on that. Can we know some numbers about the trim speed and about the top speed? And closely related to that is the question of Kevin McLaughlin. Is the into the wind glide improved?
About the numbers, we don't publish any absolute glide ratio or speed numbers for two reasons. The first and the main reason is that there is, unlike other fields of aeronautics, there is no standard for measuring speeds which everybody agrees on. So some manufacturers might measure their speed with a GPS in 3,000-meter altitude. Another manufacturer might measure the speed at sea level with a pitot probe, and the third manufacturer might just publish whatever he thinks is somewhat credible. And I don't think it makes sense to publish data without having a standard to compare this data. And the second reason is that it's indeed not so easy to accurately measure the low speeds we are flying with, at least with the instruments we have tested, which included different pitot probes, but they are not super reliable at lower speeds. So you have to live with a plus minus 2 to 3 kilometer per hour deviation from one device to another. So, and plus minus 2 or plus minus 3 kilometers per hour is already crazy much in our world. So I can't provide any reliable data. And if I could, we would have to agree on a standard first. What I can tell you about the top speed, that I'm pretty sure that the wings we compared the Mentor against were the top E&B wings, so which are the most common, known to be flying fast and performing well, and none of them matched the top speed of the Mentor 7. And which is what it's about in the end. And about the trim speed, we were in the slower range of the field, which in the end, having a big speed range in the end means having a big speed system travel. So the speed system travel on the Mentor 7 is bigger than on any other high B wing I've seen. Which is a result of the big speed range. And did I answer the second question? I think I didn't.
That's is the into the wind glide improved?
Okay. This I think there is some myth related to this into the wind glide, because I mean in laminar wind there is no such thing like into the wind glide. In turbulences there is to some extent something like into the wind glide. In the end it's if it's another laminar wind, it's about the glide in turbulences, and there the Mentor 7 is way more efficient than previous Mentors. The most crucial for the efficiency is if you can even use it in turbulences. And so you need first of all you need a wing that is stable enough to fly it with full speed for many hours without being stressed or without being rightfully stressed, because you get a lot of collapses, and the Mentor 7 certainly allows to comfortably fly for many hours at full speed, being very efficient.
Yeah. There's another question from Kaspar Nielsen, which is related to the certification. Why a high B 2.5 liner compared to a C-class 2-liner in the low C class? Guess we will see new 2-liners of different styles in the near future. Can it be that the wing gets stuck in the C class because of testing rules?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Since a couple of months only, so-called collapse lines are allowed for ENC gliders. And I don't know if all of you know what collapse lines are. I'll explain it for those who don't know it. So a collapse line is basically a copy of the A-lines, but moved very fine front. So the collapse line is usually attached exactly where the openings end. So, and you use this collapse line level only for the certification, and you use it to induce collapses. And if you induce collapse with those collapse lines, the collapse and the reaction is more gentle than without the collapse lines. For 2-liners, for 2-liners, so not 2.5-liners, but for 2-liners, it's more or less impossible. It's close to impossible to induce the certification collapse without those collapse lines. So they are simply necessary. And yeah, therefore, I would tend to say that with the current certification rules, it's more or less impossible to have a 2-liner E&B glider. Even if I don't think it would be impossible to build a 2-liner which is suitable for E&B pilots. That might be possible, but it's very unlikely to find that wing with an actual E&B rating.
So that might mean that in the future, let's say that the testing procedures might have to change again. Like before, it was every wing that was tested using a folding line was an E&D. Now has gone down to allow this on an E&C wing, and possibly it may happen that it will be done on a B wing as well. Yes,
if you extrapolate that trend into the future, we will end with 2-liner E&B wings and then with 2-liner E&A wings. I mean, there's still, I am not from today's point of view, the E&A 2-liner wing is more of a joke. And I think this 2.5-liner setup we chose with the Mentor 7 is quite a nice mix of both worlds. So I don't think it would be replaced quickly if 2-liners made sense or were possible in the E&B class. We also have to see if all today's 2.5, I mean, there are not too many, but if today's established 2.5 E&C wings will quickly get replaced by the E&C 2-liners. Yeah, we will see.
Kaspar Nielsen is asking why we as customers should stick to a 3 or a new 2.5-liner.
And the alternative being a 2-liner or a
3-liner or a 2.5-liner.
Sorry, can you repeat the full question?
Yeah, maybe it's not correct English. He was asking why we as customers should stick to the 3 or the new 2.5-liners. I mean, it's basically asking
okay.
The most important arguments for one or the other.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's my presentation was quite specific about the Mentor 7, and it's and so not everything which I said about 2.5-liners or not everything which I said about the Mentor 7 can be applied to 2.5-liners in general. And like I said, the 2.5-liner setup is just one aspect, one important, but among other important aspects we changed on the Mentor 7. So it's impossible. So, and the change from 2.5-liner to 3-liner is not big enough to make two categories with totally different flying characteristics. So it's easily possible to build a 2.5-liner which is less stable and performing worse than another 3-liner. So it won't be, it's not too hard wing categories which make a totally different flying behavior. But actually I tried to answer the question with the advantages and disadvantages. the advantages were a lot related to flying at speed. So I would say, yeah, like, and I kind of answered this question also with trying to answer the low B question. I think the benefits for a recreational pilot who is mainly thermaling at his home spot, to this pilot, the advantages of the 2.5-liner are non-existent. And if this pilot furthermore wants to have an easy wing at the SIV, which allows him to properly learn all the maneuvers, it might, the 2.5-liner the disadvantages might even outweigh the advantages. On the other hand, if you are a cross-country pilot who is trying to increase the distance or the average speed, which is basically the same, in case of the Mentor 6 and the Mentor 7, the difference is huge, and the advantages of the 2.5-liner setup outweigh the advantages of the 3-liner setup by far. So I think it depends on what you want to do with the wing.
Yeah, a question that is kindly related to is from Fabio Vicente. He calls it a rookie question, and he wants to know, would it be a good transition wing from stepping up from an Ionic?
Absolutely. Absolutely, yes, absolutely. The feedback we got from the few mentor pilots so far, which is in line with our own impression, that the wing is actually very easy to fly. So it's the handling is very intuitive, the stability is very high. So there are no surprises, no bad surprises to be expected, just good ones. And the target group hasn't changed, and the pilot demand hasn't increased. The in-flight, I would say, the only aspect where the pilot demand has increased is what I already mentioned, is maybe the riser takes a bit more care, but the in-flight pilot demand has actually decreased, I would say. And since the Ionic is very close to a low B wing, since it's a high A wing, a high B wing, and the Mentor 7 totally makes sense.
Okay. Jerry Mann asked another question. How do 2.5-liners compare to 2-liners in the amount of active flying you have to do?
It's a difficult question because again, when I answer this question, it's difficult to not to talk just about the difference which is caused by the 2-liner versus the 2.5-liner setup. When we talk about 2-liners, we are talking about wings with way more aspect ratio than the Mentor has, because there is no existing 2-liner. I mean, there are existing, but there is no existing reasonable 2-liner with an aspect ratio of less than 6, I would say. And those wings need more active piloting than the Mentor, but not so much because it's a 2-liner, but because it's a wing with more aspect ratio. And if you compared two wings with the same aspect ratio, a 6-point aspect ratio 7 3-liner doesn't need any more any less active piloting than a 2-liner with the same aspect ratio. So I would say there is no difference in terms of active piloting.
Okay. From Wolfgang Petter is an interesting question. Going down on the reserve, how do you hold the wing stable if the B-stall is not recommended? Have you tested B-stall while going down with the reserve?
No. There is, I don't know of, there is certainly no reserve deployment yet with the Mentor 7. I was just about to say that I don't know of a near reserve deployment, but then I don't know if you saw it, Theo and Nick's almost crash with 2 Mentor 7s, which you might have seen on Instagram, came to my mind. But yeah, they didn't need a reserve. So there is no real life experience of reserve deployments with the Mentor 7. I could imagine that in this reserve case, pulling the B works okay. But since I'm no expert on this. I have an experience of 2 intentional reserve deployments in my life, and that's it. So I'm certainly not an expert. But I think this B-stall scenario, once you are twisted multiple times, doesn't work so well. And I think in many reserve cases, you are twisted multiple times. And then the best thing you can do is grab whatever part of the wing you get and hold it, especially if you have a steerable reserve. So I don't think that's a downside. Since this, I mean, I know that the B-stall scenario works nicely if you throw the reserve from straight flight, but without having tried it, so I'm yeah, like I said, I'm not an expert on this, but I can't imagine pulling a B-stall if you are twisted 3 times. So I'm not sure how big the real life relevance of this question is.
Okay, I think you go on with your sheets and answer some more questions later.
So the sheet is a singular, it's a sheet. It's just 1 sheet left. And that I wanted to summarize how the Mentor 7 actually flies. And yeah, that's this list is already quite affected by the feedback we got from our team pilots and a couple of other pilots. Actually, all of them point out how easy and calm it is to fly in turbulences. One of our team pilot, he had a couple of flights with the wing already. One among those flights is the one in the screenshot you see on the left. And after the first 2 flights, he said, "Oh, it's really calm, but probably the thermals have been so calm, but it felt weird to him." And then he flew it a couple of more times, and other pilots said that the conditions were quite rough. And yeah, in the end, he realized or he came to the conclusion it's more the glider that flies so calm and easy than the conditions were easy. Then all the pilots point out the very high stability. So you rarely get collapses. I already talked about the low trim speed, the high top speed, and also about the other 2 points, which is the effortless sea steering, which works you can really use it on an 8-hour flight without getting tired. And yeah, and in the end, combined with the high stability and the high top speed, it really helps to increase your average speed and therefore your distance, because you can keep the speed pushed fully and compensate turbulences super nicely with the C handles like you could normally only do on a 2-liners B handle. And I already talked about the EMB benchmark performance. So we not just made a huge progress in terms of speed and stability, but also in terms of performance in calm air as well as in moving air. I'm not sure if this video makes sense with my and Zoom starter rate, but I'll try it nonetheless. That's a flight from just 3 days ago from Werner Luidold, who wanted to fly 200 kilometers from Italy home to him, and he was flying together with a very good pilot, multiple time state champion, and I think not even just a state champion, with a E&D 2-liner. And yeah, Werner was really surprised how well he could fly together, actually wing to wing for the first, I think, almost 100 kilometers. And then their path split it, not because of the gliders, but because they choose a different route. So yeah, we've already gathered lots of real life cross-country feedback from different very good pilots, and yeah, the feedback is really overwhelming. Never had such a feedback before.
Sounds interesting. There's one question from Ishan Ahuya, which is related to the weight range. And he asks, the Mentor 7 is reasonably smaller than other wings for the same weight range. Does it make it more dynamic or harder to fly?
I don't think it's sorry.
And maybe you should also point out that typically the NOVA weight ranges for size S is from 80 to 100 kilos, but it's 205 on the Mentor 7. How did that happen?
Yeah, so the first question, yes, it's smaller than the Mentor 6, but it's but if you compare it to other high B wings, it's not the smallest, or it's not. Yeah, it's not crazy small. But and so it's there are bigger wings, and there are also not too many, but there are also slightly smaller wings, so it's not too special in that regard. And the second question, which was Til's question, is that we usually, I think since the Mentor 1, we always had those 10 kilogram steps. So the S being certified up to 100 kilo, the M up to 110 kilo, and so on. And on the Mentor 7, we initially intended to have the same weight ranges, but we found out that it climbs better than the previous Mentors, even at the top weight range. So we thought it might make sense for cross-country pilots on good days to increase the wing loading a bit more, still climb pretty good, and have even better high-speed performance. But if you were happy on a previous Mentor S glider with 100 kilo, with 100 kilos, you can expect the same amount of agility, let's say, from the Mentor 7 with 100 kilograms. So there's certainly no need to fly it on the very top, but it still might make sense for certain conditions, for certain pilots. So I would say the usable weight range is simply a bit bigger than it has been on previous gliders.
Then there is a question from Kerim. He wants to know, will it SAT?
If it yes, yes, it that's one that's one advantage of this two-liner setup, at least with the airfoil we're using. I totally forgot to mention. Yeah, but it's one of the rare. It's one of the few NOVA wings which sets really nicely. Usually we have usually in SAT we have a wingtip stability problem, so the wingtips start flapping. That's what many wings do, but the Mentor 7 doesn't do it at all. So it sets really nicely.
Talking about performance again, Ali Mac, he's asking, have you done performance comparisons against a range of different E&C gliders? If so, how did the Mentor 7 compare?
We only we compared it to only one non-NOVA E&C glider. So we compared it to our own sector, and the Mentor 7 outperforms the sector by a big margin. And we also compared it to another recent E&C wing, which we thought is the could be considered E&C benchmark glider, and we were pretty even. We were even slightly faster than this E&C wing with a very similar performance.
Talking again about the wing load, Alan Brasington is asking, some manufacturers recommend to be in the middle of the weight range, and some recommend to be at the high end of the range. What do you recommend for the Mentor 7? I think this will be a question that you will hear very often, that I will have to answer very often on Facebook.
Yeah, first, yes. So it'll be a longer answer because this question is asked so often. First of all, there is this interesting, almost dogma in the paragliding world that you have to fly a wing on top of its weight range, which and almost like there is some natural law that where you people act like there is a natural law which makes it reasonable to fly on top of the weight range, but you have to be aware that the weight range to the most extent is arbitrarily chosen by the manufacturer. So in some cases the weight range is limited by the certification. So it might be that with too high wing loading, the manufacturer wouldn't get the intended certification. But in most of the cases, that's not the reason for the weight limits, at least in our case. In our case, the reason for the weight limits usually is what we think makes sense. So for the intended use. So the weight range is on the Mentor 7. So the top weight range, the upper limit of the weight range, we decided it because we think that's more or less the limit where flying this wing as a cross-country wing makes sense. If somebody wanted to fly the wing in highs for high wind speed coastal soaring, it might make sense to fly it a lot heavier. But we thought that the weight ranges we have makes sense for cross-country flying. And that's quite subjective, obviously. Maybe if we were different pilots flying in a different part of the world, in different weather conditions, we would have come up with different limits. If we were flatland pilots, we might have come up with lower limits. If we were, I don't know, testing in the Himalayas, in super strong winds, we might have come up with even higher weight limits. So my point is that you can't calculate the weight limits according to some physical rule, but that it's subjective. And therefore, it doesn't make sense as a pilot to always aim for the top weight limit of a wing, because the top weight limit might mean something different at one manufacturer than it means then on a wing of another manufacturer. And it's not just subjective, not the weight limits themselves are subjective, but also from the pilot's perspective, it's subjective which weight limit makes sense, or which part of the weight range makes sense. There are people, if there are people who there might be two equally good pilots, and one just prefers flying on the very top of the weight range, and the other one might simply prefer flying with 10 kilograms less weight. So that's it's impossible to give a suggestion like flight on the top 20% or whatever on the weight range. It simply doesn't make sense. Even even for very good cross-country pilots, so even for this narrow group of pilots who fly in the Alps, there is not always a consensus which weight range makes the most sense. Some pilots really focus on being able to launch as early as possible, and therefore to climb as good as possible, because you need to use the very, very first thermal of the day. And other pilots focus more on the average speed later during the day. So yeah, it's impossible. It's impossible to give a clear recommendation, or to even less possible to calculate something. What I would say in case of the Mentor 7, I mean, I think I already said it, that the usable weight range is quite big. So it's, I would say, not a wing where you easily make a mistake by choosing the wrong size or the wrong weight range, because if you fly it on the very top, obviously the climb performance in weak thermals is worse than if you fly it in the middle of the weight range, but it's still pretty good. That's again a benefit of the slow trim speed, and so you don't make a big mistake if you fly it heavy and then fly in weak thermals. And on the other hand, you don't make a big mistake if you fly it lighter, because the top speed will still be very high, the stability will still be big, and the handling will still be good. So it's so you won't make, so you don't easily make a big mistake. And in the end, it's impossible to give a recommendation, also because it's a matter of your personal likings. If you are used to, a good indication is always the wing loading of your current glider, especially if it's in the same aspect ratio range. You shouldn't compare wing loadings between very different aspect ratio wings. But if you compare wing loadings of two gliders with a similar wing load, with a similar aspect ratio, that's the best indication to me. So if you're currently happy with a certain wing loading, it makes sense to aim for a similar wing loading on the Mentor 7.
Yeah, I might add something from my experience as the captain of the NOVA pilots team. At several team meetings, we have had discussions about the perfect wing load on a certain wing model. And exactly what you just described happened there. There were people who flew it in the middle of the weight range, and others said always on the max weight range. So it's definitely a matter of taste and what you like. And if somebody asks me what shall I buy, I say ideally try, if you are between two sizes, try both of them to find out what suits you better. And testing yourself is always the best thing, I think. We have one more question from Anne-Sophie Lemesle. She wants to know, will XXS be the smallest size? So the question is, will you do an XXXS?
The XXS is still work in progress, so it's very hard to it's always very hard to predict the outcome of the triple XS, and the Mentor is no exception to that. Yeah, those small sizes are very tricky to, because we want to retain the performance and the speed and the handling and the safety and the stability of the glider, and obviously it has to work for certification. And yeah, we have to find out if that works on the Mentor 7.
Yeah.
I don't know. There are two reasons that such small wings are very rare. The one reason is obviously that the market is not too big, and the other reason is that it's pretty hard to combine all the things I just mentioned. So I really don't know, but we'll try and find out.
Yeah. There's an interesting question regarding the launch behavior, as there are obviously some 2.5 liners on the market who are not that easily being launched at nil or light wind conditions. What's the light wind forward launching behavior of the Mentor 7?
It's pretty normal, pretty easy, and I don't think the 2.5 liner setup changes the launch behavior. I mean, even if you look at pure 2-liners, I mean, for sure 2-liners launch a bit different than 3-liners, but still there are 2-liners. I mean, there are X-Alps gliders, among them the XENON, which launches super easy in zero wind, which launches easier than, I would say, most 3-liners with the same aspect ratio. So again, I don't think the 2.5 liner setup is beneficial or a downside regarding the launch behavior.
Okay. Jerry Mann is also asking, will there be an ENC 2-liner coming up from NOVA?
We are considering an ENC 2-liner, yes. And actually we have protos flying, but nothing publishable yet. Okay.
So I hope we've answered most questions. I might have overseen one or the other. My apologies for that. People, maybe you can switch off your shared screen.
Sure.
Just for the last seconds. I would like to tell everybody that you can watch all the NOVA Insights on YouTube. There's a dedicated playlist, and we will add this. The playlist is already added in the comments, so you can already see it. Some of them are in English, some of them are in German. So we try to satisfy everybody. I would also like to thank Ines for their work, because she's the number 3 person behind the screen, and she doesn't want to show herself, because she's managing everything that's behind that you can see, because we have an internal Zoom meeting, and that's actually transferred to YouTube, and that's why you see it now. And without Ines, it wouldn't work, and she's also the filter for all the questions. Thanks, Ines. And last information, I think, of course, thanks people, not to forget about you. it's planned that on April 7, the website for the Mentor 7 Lite will go online. At the moment, it's just a few facts, but the full and really detailed website will be online on April 7. At least that's what we're hoping for. And so this 8th episode of the NOVA Insight is the last one for that, let's say, winter season. But we plan to continue because the feedback was very positive. You are welcome to send us your wishes, what you would like to hear. You can use Instagram or Facebook, or also use the chat and comment here on YouTube, and we will try to, answer your questions as good as we can. So that's it for today. And on behalf of the entire NOVA team, I would like to wish all of you a great XC season this year in the Alps, which has already begun so fantastically and so beautifully. So let's hope it goes on like that. All the best. Cheers and bye-bye.
Bye.